Hello friends, this is Utz, officially at least, and today I'm going to do what I think is my first tier list ever. Unfortunately, I cannot make this a super long hour video since I'm busy with other projects, but I'll make it a quick one, go over every killer with a few thoughts. It might actually change your mind, it might make you realize some things. I hope this will be the most useful tier list that I can make it. If you just want to write a very angry comment saying, why is this killer here? Oh my god, shake my head. Then by all means, this is the tier list, go ahead and do it. Before you do that though, I highly encourage you to listen. The most important thing I need to do right now is to specify which conditions will apply to this tier list. If someone gives you a tier list without explaining anything, it doesn't really mean much, because are the add-ons considered? Is it every map? Is it with someone who's average? Is it with someone who's good, etc, etc? All these things really matter, so I'm gonna make an effort to explain the conditions for my personal tier list. Some people make tier lists with no add-ons. Some people make tier lists playing against 4 tournament level survivors. I'm going to make it as realistic as it can be, so that it's a faithful reflection of what you can expect when you play at a higher level with the new MMR system, and when you really play well against the normal survivors you'll be playing. Let's go over it. The main criteria, the thing that will sort killers from up to down, is actually their reliability and their consistency when it comes to winning. And what I personally define as winning is killing 3 or 4 survivors before they escape, basically. I will make no distinction. This will be a binary thing. I will make no distinction between winning at 5 gens and winning at 1 gen. Obviously, killers who can do the first one are usually better, but no distinction. Also, for example, Trapper with his traps can trap the exit gates and secure the 4 kill in a hatch scenario. I will not be counting that. As long as you win, that's good enough for me, and I will only be sorting killers based out on how consistently and how reliably they can do this against different kinds of survivors. I will not be considering also how difficult it is. For some killers, they need to really squish their brain and play really hard to get 3 kills, and for some other killers that are simpler or stronger, they can do the same. They can do the same 3 kills without really doing much because the character is easier to play. Difficulty will not be considered. So I will not be ranking higher the killers that are easier and ranking lower the killers that are harder. I'm going to assume that you're just going to put the same effort, and no matter how much effort is required, the result will be what matters. So that's also important to say. When it comes to platform, this is very important. This is a PC tier list, assuming that you have the highest FPS, that you play on the best possible resolution, that you have the best gaming chair money can buy, etc, etc, etc. On console, of course, many of these things would change slightly. We're also assuming that you're not playing on LAN. You're playing on ping that is decent on the current dedicated servers. That's both good, because the decent ping is nice, but, you know, dedicated servers is a factor, so we will be considering it. There are also currently a few killer-specific bugs. The Chainsaw Bros have add-ons that don't work the way they should yet. The Plague, for example, has her POV broken. All of these things I'm going to assume, for the sake of argument, that they are fixed tomorrow. Otherwise, it would be really weird to just place one of these killers up and down, you know, until they get fixed a week from now on. So we're going to assume that those specific bugs are fixed going forward. Next up, this is probably the most important part. I'm going to assume that you have mastered each of these killers. You have several thousand, 2,000, 3,000 hours on each, that you play them really well. Obviously within limits. There's no one out there who can play Huntress and never miss a hatchet. There's no one out there who can play Trapper and set 3 traps that will catch all survivors at once. Like, realistically, you're going to play really well within human limits. I'm also going to assume that the 4 survivors you're going to be playing against are going to have a difference in skill, because let's be real, that's what's going to happen in most of your games. Very rarely you will play against 4 survivors that are all equally the same level of skill. There's usually a difference, but the average survivor that you would be playing against in this tier list would be actually pretty good on your level. So for every survivor that's maybe not so good, there's another survivor that's actually really good. Even though the survivors will have different skills, on average, they will be really good. They'll be competent, they'll know how to loop, they'll know the weakness of each killer, and they'll overall play decently. I'm also going to assume that there's the usual mix of solo and survivor friends players. I think the developers some time ago said something like 75% at high ranks. If I remember correctly, at high ranks it was something like 75-25 mix of 75 people playing with their friends, and the 25% remaining playing solo. So on average, you would have that kind of results of playing against some survivor friends, but also some solo players. And of course, we're also going to assume that there's no prior knowledge. You're not playing in a tournament where they know the killer. You're not playing against friends that you recognize where you already know their perks. Neither side knows what the other one will bring, and there's the element of surprise. That's normally what happens in a random game, right? So we're going to assume that as well. That's really, really important for some killers. We'll see why later. Next up, we're going to talk about everything that survivors and killers can bring. I'm going to assume that you have every killer perk unlocked and that any of them are available. Because perks are not consumed, they're not like add-ons, you can bring them every time. So if a killer is only good with one perk, but that perk makes them really good, that's perfectly fine, because you could theoretically bring that perk every game ever and not have to ever take it off. So that's completely fine. Perks are all available for all the killers. Add-ons will be considered. The add-ons that are more common will be considered more. So killers that have add-ons that are low rarity that are good, that's great. And if they have better and better add-ons, that's also good. I am making some exceptions, however, because there are several killers who have add-ons that are borderline broken. And they don't really improve or enhance the killer's powers, they just change them completely. So for example, when I judge the clown, I will be judging them based on everything. I will not be judging them on pinky finger. And when I judge Huntress, I will not be basing Huntress off iridescent head. These add-ons are broken. They change the game too much, and they're not an actual reflection of the killer themselves without it. So for that reason, those very few add-ons that are broken in that manner, I will be trying not to consider at all. While every other add-on I will be considering more and more. If you want to know which of these add-ons I am generally not considering, go watch my very long add-on guide, and you'll see which ones I select as S tier, aka broken. I hope that makes sense to you. I think it would be very, very warped if I start considering some of those really broken add-ons. It wouldn't be a fair reflection, because let's be honest, not every game you play against Clown is going to be Pinky Finger Clown, and not every game you play as Clown you're going to play, hopefully you're not going to play Pinky Finger Clown every match. So I'm going to assume that those outlying add-ons are out of the way. Also, I'm going to assume that you're playing fair, and you're not bringing a Mori every match, and you're not sending yourself to the best map with a map offering every match. I'm going to assume that you're just using BP offerings, and you're not sending yourself to anywhere. This is important because Moris break the game, and obviously if I play Doctor on the game every match, then I can be like, oh, Doctor is S tier, but that wouldn't be fair. I'm going to assume that you're going to play on every map. There's like 30 of them. You're going to be playing on every map, on and off, on and off. So that will be important for some killers that are map dependent. And I'm also going to assume that the survivors will bring the usual perks that they bring. And at higher ranks, you know what that's like. They have the Unbreakable, they have the Sprint Burst, they have the Dead Hearts, all of these perks that you frequently see, that's what you're going to be versing, right? With the odd, rare perk here and there, but that's about it. And I believe that covers everything. That should pretty much tell you where I'm coming from. If after this we disagree, well, it will come down to something else, but hopefully the conditions are there. I think these conditions are the best I could come up with, so that this tier list is useful in determining how each killer will react in normal high rank or high MMR games. That's the way I see it. If you have a disagreement, please let me know. That being said, we will be returning to the tier list now, and I will be explaining my reasonings as to why these placements are the way they are. We'll be selecting each killer as we talk about them, and we're gonna start with the nurse. The nurse has theoretically and sort of in practice the strongest killer power in the game. It's one of those killers that, if played perfectly, in theory, gives pretty much no counter to survivors. Her ability to just end chases very, very quickly is pretty much what keeps her here, with, some nice mobility and the ability to disregard verticality in maps as well. So she navigates into the basement or onto second floors really, really well, which some other killers cannot really do. Most of the killers cannot really do, in fact. And just the fact that you can find a survivor, hit them, and then use your add-ons or your very good judgment to down them very quickly, and then go for someone else immediately. Just the fact that you can ramp up the pressure like that is what elevates her to this level of tier. You can start a match, find a baby Dwight, hit him once, do a good blink, hit him again, Infectious Fright reveals Meg nearby, chase Meg, and now you have pretty much the entire team on damage control, trying to go back and pick up the slugs. Now, the nurse is not unbeatable. If you watch some tournaments, you'll see how survivors use very strong perks, you know, unbreakable, etc., to diminish her snowball potential, and how they also use very tricky movements and line of sight blockage to make her job much harder and make her actually struggle to get that first hit or finish the deal. But to be completely fair, on your average matches, you will not be playing against a 4-man team with thousands of hours each. And it doesn't even matter if there's a couple survivors that are really good. As long as you identify the weak links in the chain, Nurse is potentially the strongest killer in the game. She does require a bit of perks. She struggles a little bit with tracking. It's one of her weaknesses. And you will lose games as Nurse, but most of the time when you do lose those games as Nurse, it will be because your blinks were not absolutely on point, or because the survivors fairly outplayed you. There's not really that much to say. Her add-ons are serviceable. They enhance her recovery, her range, with the odd utility add-on here and there that can make survivors' job a little bit harder when it comes to hiding. The spoon, the keepsake, her add-ons are not crazy, but they are serviceable, and they make her base kit, which has been nerfed some months back, a lot more palatable, and basically make her like old Nurse without add-ons. She's very strong, and even though, again, there is counterplay, you will struggle to find survivors in your average matches that know how to play against a good Nurse. It takes really good survivors to play against the Nurse, and against the good Nurse, even though survivors will have a hard time. The fact that she's also not very map dependent is great. There are a few maps where line of sight is tough for her, but those maps tend to be small or tend to have verticality, which she handles well. So for the most part, if you play Nurse, you will never be like, oh, this map I've already lost, which really helps her a lot. Most people don't ever argue that Nurse is the best killer in the game. I think it's arguable. I don't think she's that far from the other two, but we'll get to them and explain them. My second pick for the best killer in the game is Spirit. The thing you gotta understand with Spirit is that her add-ons are insane. Her add-ons are insanely good. You have a killer whose main strength is also in the chase. Otherwise than that, she's actually not that threatening. The Spirit doesn't have any inbuilt game stall like Pig, say. She doesn't have any crazy mobility like Freddy or Billy, at least not by default. But her 1v1 is really good. You get to a survivor, you hit them, they're not injured, and it's almost inevitable that you will be able to track them well and down them just a few seconds after that. A few things to say about this. Number one, the Spirit equalizes the survivors' kills a lot. Where I said before that good survivors know how to play against a good Nurse and know a few tricks to really delay her and make it difficult, even good survivors struggle against the Spirit. When you play against the really good survivors, they still cannot always guess correctly where you're going to be coming from, and they also cannot hear your footsteps well enough. She makes even really good survivors make really silly plays because her power is just so unpredictable and leaves so much to guessing. That being said, you as a Spirit, do you have to guess? Is it a 50-50? Not really. The really experienced Spirits do several things. They have really good headsets. They play at volumes that would blow your brains out. They use sound settings outside of the game, like what is it called? The spatial sound or custom equalizers to cancel out the noise and keep the cries of pain. They also use Strider, which is a perk that does two things. Number one, it makes your cries of pain louder, which completely outplays Iron Will. And number two, it makes your normal breathing louder as well. Some of the top Spirits that I've seen will be able to find survivors around them by just hearing their breathing, which is insane. And when you play her at this level, she's honestly basically unstoppable. It's really hard to play against a Spirit like this, and I've had the misfortune of playing against a few like this. And it's really hard. Basically, the survivor is at your mercy. They're waiting for you to make a mistake so that they can wait on your recovery and run away. And here's the thing, her add-ons make it even better for her. The Spirit add-ons are not like some of the add-ons that I will be not considering, like Iridescent Head Huntress. Her add-ons don't necessarily break her. and make her insta down or make her do anything crazy, but they actually enhance what she does to such a degree that is actually really crazy. If you want to know more, again, go watch the add-on video where I break down the numbers. But all of her add-ons are pretty insane. The brown ones are good, the yellow ones are better, the green ones are crazy strong. Due to an unintended feature, her duration add-ons also add recovery, and one of her add-ons adds a lot of duration, but that's also a lot of there are so many things that work out for her in terms of add-ons. And even if you outplay her with good add-ons, okay, she's wasted 5 seconds, now she's gonna do the same thing again, and now you're down. So her 1v1 is pretty much the only thing that keeps her at this spot. That and the fact that she has very little counterplay when you're versing a really good spirit, which is what we're assuming here. That being said, she does require perks to slow down the game and to manage larger maps, and it is also a killer that you can make a few mistakes with and easily lose a game. But if you play her flawlessly and abuse the fact that her add-ons only get better and better, possibly the strongest killer in the game. If we consider all the add-ons, possibly the strongest killer in the game. And also one, again, that will work even against really decent survivors. Next up, however, is Hag. Hag is very different from our two previous girls. She is, I think, the most unique killer in the game, and many people are surprised to see her here in S tier. I don't think it would be crazy to put her in front of Nurse and Spirit even. I'm gonna tell you right now, overall, in terms of like different conditions, Hag might actually be just straight up the strongest killer in the game as well. If you play Spirit without perks, you will struggle. If you play Nurse without perks, you will probably struggle. If you play Spirit without add-ons, unless you're the best, you'll probably also have a slightly harder time. Meanwhile, Hag here is insane. She can play without add-ons. Her add-ons are good, don't get me wrong. They're decent. A few gimmicky ones, but overall decent, and they do improve her already really good base good. But you can play without add-ons, and you will feel no difference. You can play without perks, and the game will play out a bit differently, but you will win consistently. She is so good under so many conditions that is actually quite scary. What makes the Hag so uniquely powerful? She, I think, is the only killer where realistically survivors have to not just hold M1. And you're gonna be like, baffled. What do you mean by that, Otzdarva? All right, so let me put it this way. If the trapper sets up a few traps at the start and survivors hold M1, they'll finish 3 generators by the time he downs someone, probably. And that might be good enough, maybe, potentially, perhaps, for the trapper to maybe make a comeback later. But the fact that you've lost 3 gens means that they're probably going to be able to power through the last 2, and you're not going to have time to kill them prematurely. That goes for pretty much every other killer. All the other killers, at the start of the match, as a general rule, they have to find a survivor and they have to chase them. That's what they have to do. The Hag, however, doesn't play like that. At the start of the match, as a Hag, you set up traps and you create a perimeter, a web of traps, if you will. And that perimeter, maybe each trap takes you 10 seconds, or on average, and then it saves you 30 or 40 or 20 seconds down the line. You set out a good set of traps at the start, and survivors will lose. They will lose. It doesn't even matter if they're tournament level, if they're really good. If they allow you to set up, it only takes one mistake for them to immediately lose the game. And that's it. I've won games more decisively with fewer perks in worse maps than with any other killer. We have a 50 win streak on her with no add-ons, playing without perks, playing with random perks, doing all kinds of crazy things, because survivors on average are not able to immediately counterplay her. So what do I mean by this? How you beat every other killer, for the most part, is just hold M1 on gens at the start and hope that they have a bad start and then go from there. With the Hag, you cannot do that. You need to immediately or almost immediately have one person, or maybe multiple, immediately go to harass the Hag and not allow her to set up a consistent web of traps. If you constantly harass her, if you have a flashlight or two, if you induce her into making a few mistakes, then maybe you have a good chance of beating a Hag. But when you're a good Hag, you even can play around some of these things. But if you don't do any of these things, if you sit on generators and do a couple gens, by the time the Hag has someone on a hook, she will have 10 traps on the ground. And it will be impossible. She will be everywhere. You will not be able to to do anything. You see a lot of really good spirits, a lot of really good nurses. You don't see a lot of good hacks, but when you do, you'll see exactly what I mean. And in my opinion, against the average survivors that you'll find, the hag possibly the strongest skill in the game. Now, when you have really good survivors thrown into the mix, that becomes a little bit harder. If those survivors also are on comms and they have a couple flashlights, or maybe they have an obstacle obsession and they're really smart and they play really well against you, it's gonna be a bit more of a toss. You're actually gonna have to not just, you know, put that traps down and wait for them to die automatically. You're actually gonna have to outsmart them. But that is still possible. I have still won against games with 2 objects with some of the best survivors that I've seen. Hag is really powerful, and I am honestly running out of things to say about her. One thing that's really worth mentioning, Hag has a perk that lets her set up traps and still not lose gens, which is Corrupt Intervention. Corrupt Intervention on Hag is insane. You can set up 6, 7 traps and have survivors finish no gens in the meantime. If you're lucky, by the time someone is down on a hook, you still have 5 gens up. I have won so many games with 5 or 4 gens done. 5 or 4 gens left because of Corrupt. It is insane. Perks are good on her, but not even necessary. Add-ons are great on her, but not even necessary. And if you just invest the bare minimum at getting good at her, you'll see just what I mean. Next up, however, we're going to be discussing Oni. Oni, once he gets the ball rolling, is a tremendously strong killer. One thing that really keeps him high up is the fact that he has phenomenal add-ons. The most notable, I'll go through some of them. Some of the add-ons make you move a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, which is serviceable and nice. Some of them make the survivors drop more blood, which will help you get your power quicker, which is also super nice. Many of them extend the duration of your power, and this is also really good because it minimizes the penalty that you get when you down a survivor. His add-ons are quite complex. Again, go watch the add-on video. But the one that you need to understand the most important one is the Sculpt Top Knot. The Sculpt Top Knot, for some reason, is a green add-on that increases basically cuts the charge time in half for his Demon Dash. So normally, what you do with this killer in a normal game will be to hit a survivor. You get half your power, roughly, it's 40%. Then you chase them around a little bit, make them drop a pallet, make them vault a window or 2, and then you get your power. Then you down the survivor, or you go for someone else. Then you activate your power, and then you have one of the most amazing chasing powers in the game. You can, if someone sprint bursts in front of your face, you can catch up to them. If someone dead hards in front of you, you can do even some tricks to bait it out and still hit them. He can outplay basically anything. The only thing that holds him back a little bit is the fact that he has a limited field of view, and some really smart survivors can play around that when he does it, and play around his dead angles, and the fact that his charge time takes like a second, right? So before he starts dashing into you and acting like a reverse Billy of sorts, he has to charge it up, then starts running and hit. And in some structures, very few structures, but in some structures, that little charge time gives really good survivors enough time to actually maneuver around, get the quick vault here and there. With the Sculpt Top Knot, that's not even a thing. It's like a charge add-on for Billy that cut his chainsaw in half. But for this guy, it's so ridiculously powerful that Oni mains pretty much frown upon using it because it's just so strong. So yeah, add-ons make this killer a chasing nightmare. Infectious Fright, really powerful on him. Pop Goes the Weasel, like all the good perks are pretty much made for this guy. And they all work really well on him. So what's keeping him from being S tier? Not a whole lot, to be completely fair. S tier killers are not that far beyond Oni's scope. The one thing that really holds him back, however, is the start of the game. If you play against 4 survivors, unlike Hag, you're not going to be hiding with monitor and abuse and setting up traps. You actually have to go and meet them. So they're going to figure out that you're Oni relatively soon. Ideally, they figure it out a little bit too late and you get a sneaky hit and then you get the ball rolling. Worst case scenario, however, you find survivors who are in a good spot or who have sprint bursts and they run to a good spot and then they start pre-dropping every pallet and abusing every strong window. the early game is the most delicate time for the Oni. Nobody's injured, so nobody's dropping blood for his power, and you haven't smacked anybody, so you don't have any power to build up on. His low build up is, you know, not good. You cannot just build your power up. It's not like Freddy, where his power just comes automatically. He actually has to work for it. So if you have 4 survivors who are aware of this and who play really safe, it might actually be quite difficult to get your power up before they do a significant amount of progress on generators. So here's where your perks need to help you out, and here's where you need to get a little bit lucky and do a cheeky mind game or two, and where you need to pray that the survivors fall for it. If survivors give you a hard time at the start, and then have some perks to give them second chances throughout the game, it will be too late. Unfortunately, I played Oni against some competitive teams, and I've seen things go both ways, right? You get a hit early, and you know, eventually you make it back and push them. Sometimes the first hit takes slightly too long, and yep, by the time you have your power, yeah, now you're a menace, but all gens are pretty much about to be done. And you have to deal with DS, Adrenaline, all the very strong perks from survivors. That being said, not much else to say about this killer. He has an insanely high skill ceiling. You can learn to do many tricks, a lot of potential for mind games by running into walls and gliding, and he is very fun and very rewarding, one of my favorite killers to play as, and one I certainly recommend for you to try. But yeah, this is why I believe he's in A tier, and again, it wouldn't be crazy to put him on the bottom of S tier, because he's a very powerful killer. And again, against the average survivors, you will most likely get your power early. Next up is our boy the Executioner, which just came out and is much harder to judge than the other killers. That being said, my early experiences, I put this man on A tier. He is very strong. His add-ons resemble a bit like Hag. They're not crazy, the ultra rares are not super good, the purples are a bit gimmicky, but it's the greens, the yellow, and the browns that increase his base power that really help. And those add-ons, they're good, but they're not super necessary because his base power is already pretty solid, his base kit. So what does the base kit of the Executioner include? Basically 2 things. Number 1, the ability to put survivors into torment and send them into cages is a direct counter to some of the stronger survivor perks in the game. And if you are playing against people who use these perks, you will be very happy this is part of him. You can play around Unbreakable DS, you can play around Deliverance, you can play around Borrow Time, all these really strong perks, this man can play around to a large degree. And that is huge. Just the fact that this killer's base power takes maybe 25 or 30% of the survivor's perk pools, that's pretty nice. But that alone wouldn't be what would place him on A tier in my opinion. Because survivors, after all, if you don't pressure them enough, they will not step on Torment. And they will not be forced to make rough decisions and step into Torment accidentally and stuff like that. So what exactly keeps this man in A tier? He is a chasing monster. He is not very different from Spirit or Nurse in so that if played perfectly, survivors have very little to do. Now, it is hard to play him perfectly, mind you, and there might come a point where someone really masters him and this killer is on S tier level, or maybe there is a cap that I am yet to realize and maybe the killer doesn't get much better than this. But what do I mean by this? So, the Executioner is a killer that moves at 115, so he's a normal movement speed killer. He can do every movement, mind game, chasing pattern that the average killer can do. And on top of that, he has the ability to put down his sword on the ground, which slows him down for like a second, and then move at 110. When he moves at 110, similar to Huntress, Spirit, and so on, he is a bit slower, but now he has the ability to do 2 things. Number 1, he can do a range attack with a range of 8 meters by default, 10 plus meters with add-ons, that goes through walls and can hit through windows and through pallets. And he can also, thanks to a little trick, can immediately swing into M1. So picture this. You're chasing a survivor into a window. When he gets close to the window, you put your sword on the ground. And now he's fucked. He's literally fucked. If he goes through the window, you let go of your... you release your punishment of the dam, you use your range attack, and you hit him as he's going through the window. That's a hit. He's down. If he tries to fake it, you just keep going and then let go of M2, quickly tap M1, and you go from having your show on the ground to normal M1 attack. He's down again. This situation where you hit him one way or you hit him another is what makes Pyramid Head just so powerful. You're going around a pallet that's dropped. Same thing. If you vault the pallet, punishment of the dam. If you don't drop it, slap on the face. Obviously, when the pallet is up, there's more room for mistake, but if he plays it well, it's the exact same thing. The only counter to this killer, similar to Nurse, is to hope that he makes a mistake, again, similar to Nurse, or to run away. If the Nurse is 30 meters away from you, for the most part, she cannot get to you immediately. If this guy is 20 meters away from you, for the most part, he cannot, well, he cannot get you, because his range attack is only 8 meters-ish. So the only realistic way to avoid this killer is to make distance on him. And that's not possible all the time or at every map. This killer, when played perfectly, is a fucking nightmare to loop. And it takes really, really good survivors who are not just good, but also very creative to make him to blunder when he is played near flawlessly. And what I mean by this, it's not like every other killer where they just have to do a pattern and keep their distance. They actually have to look at you and guess and make a correct guess. And sometimes in guessing, they will just open themselves up for a normal hit. His chasing potential is off the charts. And the only thing that holds him back is the fact that he cannot insta-down you. Right? His power doesn't allow him to insta-down you like some other killers. So if ideally you take a hit and run away and try to avoid Torment, that would be his weakness. Survivors who play smart, who take a hit and run away, who pre-drop pallets every now and then, who really know how to play against him. And even those survivors I think would struggle. This killer I think is the one that's more susceptible to go up or down at the moment. But as it is, right now, if you play him well, he's a nightmare. And I think he very well deserves the spot he's got in A tier. The only thing that I guess also holds him back, his higher rarity add-ons aren't crazy. Unlike Oni, he doesn't have any add-on that just doubles his range or increases the speed of his attack by 50%. He doesn't have any crazy add-ons like that. But again, his base power is really, really strong. In contrast is our next killer, the Huntress. The Huntress has a little bit of everything. She's got a really, really powerful base kit that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but also very, very strong add-ons. And okay, we're not going to be counting Iridescent Head Huntress with Infantry Belt because that would be busted, but she doesn't really need that combination to be really powerful. She can have a choice of having extra hatchets, which is dirty and super strong. She can have a choice between exhaustion add-ons. She has an exhaustion add-on that is green that will make you exhausted for 90 seconds. That means that she can hit you with that, go for someone else, you can do a whole generator by yourself and still not be able to use your Sprint Burst. Insanely, insanely powerful. She has wind up and cooldown add-ons that allow her to chew through survivors. A good Huntress that puts you in the basement, you will never leave the basement. And if she's got some of these add-ons, no one ever will leave the basement with you. She will be able to keep multiple people down there. This is of course assuming that the Huntress that you're playing against is really, really good. But fortunately for us, we know what that is like because there are plenty of really, really good Huntresses out there that really show how powerful she is. Some things to hold her back. Huntress is the first of these 6 killers that is actually quite map dependent. There are many structures that are really unfavorable for Huntress that even good Huntresses cannot do much about. A good Huntress cannot do anything about a structure where she cannot throw over or one of those rocks where she has to go around and get the pallet out of the way. And that's where really good survivors can hurt you. And where some maps can be a bit of a pain and will hold you back. It's not a loss cause every time you go to a map that's not perfect for Huntress, but it is a much harder match, and of course hurts you overall because out of the 30 maps, from the top of my head, I'm probably thinking that there's like a good chunk of them that are not so great for Huntress. That being said, there are some maps for her that are quite decent. And again, we have to take into account the fact that the skill ceiling to this killer is extremely high. Really good Huntresses can do things like know every gap in every structure that they can throw through. They also have a matrix-like understanding of the code. They understand that even if a survivor does an action that puts them out of sight, sometimes their hitbox is still bugged. I've seen Huntresses hit thin air because they understand that while a survivor is unhooking, their hitbox is actually a few inches to the right, and they can hit it and interrupt it. If you see a good Huntress, you probably will not question that she's placed this high. But you might have another issue with the upcoming killers that we'll get to. What else is there to say? Yeah, she's a very defensive, a very good defensive killer. One small mistake that puts your team in a precarious position, like someone in the basement or someone in a hard spot, will make it really, really hard to win after that. She does have notable weaknesses, like the fact that she's easy to stealth against because of her massive homing radius. But perks generally help in this, and you will very rarely have 4 survivors that, in tournaments, when people play against Huntress, survivors hide for 2 minutes until her corrupt intervention is gone, and they do all these crazy things. You will very rarely see this kind of play in your average matches as Huntress, and that's when you watch good Huntress, they dominate almost every match, even without add-ons. But again, if you do decide to bring add-ons, you have a ridiculous selection of them. Next up, we're gonna go for Freddy. Now, some people will question the fact that Freddy is this low. I think this is a fair position. I had a fair amount of debate and discussion while making this tier list. So why is he so high? Why is he so low? Let's get to it. So Freddy, he was reworked last year and turned into a completely different killer. Old Freddy was more of a strategic hit and run kind of killer. And I don't think he was the worst, but he was definitely on the weaker side. New Freddy is a bit more of a powerhouse. He has a passive power that makes people fall asleep. And this cannot be helped for the most part. Survivors can sometimes go out of their way to miss skill checks, wake each other up, although that gets slower over the course of the game, and find the clocks. But for the most part, people fall asleep and they cannot help it, which sucks, right? It just happens. And once people are asleep, you don't want to use your pallet add-ons. You want to use the snares. The snares are the real power of Freddy. You use the snares, you put them in a loop, and survivors cannot use the loop. They just cannot. They need to drop the pallet or take the hit and then run to the next one. He is a very, very good anti-looper once the survivor is asleep. And on top of that, he has the mobility that other killers dream of. He can teleport across the map, which also helps in maps with platforms. There are maps where even a killer that can move fast, like Billy, cannot do much about, because there's a platform or a building, second floor. He can disregard many of these things by teleporting to a gen that's already there. So mobility, anti-looping. What else did Freddy have? Well, Freddy, when he was buff, had a lot of other things going for him that were actually really, really, really crazy. And that's where most people think, wow, Freddy's like the best. Also, the developers some time ago, they revealed statistics that put Freddy as the deadliest killer in red ranks. There are 2 reasons for this, in my opinion. It's only 2. There are 2 reasons for this, in my opinion. Number 1, Freddy is, out of these killers that we've seen, and out of many that we're gonna see, Freddy is the easiest killer to play. He has the most pleasant combination of being strong, but also being easy. So if you play Huntress or Spirit or Hag and you're a complete beginner, even though these killers are arguably stronger than Freddy, you're not gonna do so well because you suck. And you make blunders and survivors chew right through you. With Freddy, it's very hard to make mistakes, it's very easy to play well, and his power is so simple that almost anybody can play him and feel really good about themselves. So for that reason, that's why I think he was in the highest kill rate position. But another thing that's worth considering is the fact that Freddy has been slightly nerfed over these past few months, ever so slightly every time. So much so that it's made it difficult to actually catch up for some people. So let me tell you about Freddy when he was reworked about a year ago. This is what he had. Old Freddy had the old Ruin. The old Ruin slowed down the game at the start, which made survivors have to go and find it, which made them all fall asleep in time for you to catch up and keep the gem. So you could put Ruin and Pop Goes the Weasel, and survivors would fall asleep before finishing a single gen, even with brand new parts and stuff, Ruin was really powerful back then. So they would all fall asleep before finishing a single gen. Whichever gen they had almost finished, you would already down one person, then you would go there, teleport, and pop it. And that was ridiculous. That was stupid. Since then, they have nerfed Ruin, and Ruin doesn't work with Pop nearly as well. So he's lost his main one-ball combo. On top of that, old Freddy, old new Freddy, he had 2 insanely powerful add-ons that were green and yellow. one yellow add-on gave him 6% slowdown, and another green add-on gave him 9% slowdown where once people were asleep. And this is insane. Old Ruin, I would say on average, slowed down the survivors by 30%, roughly. Right? It's not really what it did, but roughly that's what it achieved. So it was about 30%. Then with these two add-ons, 15%. So you would slow down gens to pretty much half. Add in Pop Goes the Weasel, add in Thanatophobia, if you will, add in whatever else, and all new Freddy was a complete disaster. It was so strong. On top of that, you have the fact that he could also ignore borrowed time, right? So if someone is asleep and they rescue someone from the hook, borrowed time doesn't work. It just doesn't work because they're oblivious, no terror radius, so borrowed time doesn't work. So all new Freddy could ignore borrowed time. But even if they were awake and they got the borrowed time save off, the Freddy could hit the person from the hook, and then the person from the hook would start to bleed out with borrowed time, because borrowed time back then worked off the terror radius. It didn't work like it does now, where if they keep running, they don't bleed out. So that person, in just a few seconds, would go whoop, boop, and fall out on the ground. So Freddy was an amazing defender of hooks and an amazing tunneler back then. Right now, because of the BT change, Deep Wound doesn't go down as long as you keep running. So even though Freddy still partially counters BT, it doesn't pretty much completely counters BT. So he's not as strong anymore. And these changes have happened slowly over the months. So that's why I think Freddy, who I would have possibly said was the 3rd or 4th best killer back then, is now on this position. Hopefully you understand this. That being said, what do his add-ons do now? Not a whole lot. The add-on that slowed down the game 9% is now 3%. And the add-on that slowed down the game 6% is now 2%. So Forever Freddy doesn't really work as much. Again, Ruin and Pop don't combo as much. You could still bring one of his stronger add-ons, like the ultra rare that makes everyone start asleep, and this is pretty strong. But good survivors, which you'll be facing, they'll play it safe. If they're awake, they'll play normally. If they're asleep, they'll be super conservative and pre-drop pallets to avoid the hits, and take the hit and keep you running. It needs, he's still a very powerful killer. Just the fact that you can nano survivor somewhat reliably, especially if some mind games are involved, and then pick them up and use Strilling or Barbecue and then pop a generator across the map. Just that fact alone makes him really powerful. Freddy eats through bad teams, but against the better teams, he will not be without struggles. In my personal opinion, I think he belongs right here. Just the fact, though, that if they have a single weak link, Freddy will probably be able to constantly deliver pops or tunnel a person out of the game, does keep him in the A tier, however. And his add-ons, even though they don't really add too much to him, they are still somewhat serviceable. There are some add-ons that are still strong. You could bring the add-on to make them all fall asleep. The swing chains are still pretty good. If you bring that, you will have some slowdown, which is better than most killers. You could also bring the add-on to counter object. Object of Obsession hurts Freddy a lot. It makes the survivor with object be able to constantly see him through walls, which is really bad. Makes really hard to loop good survivors who can see you, as if they had wall hacks. So that's really tough. But if you anticipate that someone could be running it, you can run the add-on that makes them blind. That way you see them, but they don't see you, which is obviously good. So that's a decent add-on you could put on, expecting that kind of trouble. Overall, however, he is a killer with a decent base kit that doesn't really need the add-ons. And hopefully you'll see where I'm coming from in terms of weaknesses and strength. And next up, a position that might be surprising for some people. Plague. As I said, Plague has a current bug that is quite nasty. It makes her point of view lower, so aiming is off. But assuming that gets fixed, and assuming that she plays the same way she played like about a week ago, then Plague is one of the stronger killers in the game, for absolute sure. Plague is to Huntress what Oni is to Old Billy. She has a power that is better than Huntress, which is the Corrupt Purge, but that is on a timer based availability. What I mean by this is that when she drinks from her pool, she has 60 seconds of being one of the stronger killers in the game. But her pools are limited and survivors are not stupid. And if they play it smart, they'll make it hard for you to capitalize from this a lot. So what makes Plague this high of a killer? We could begin. Number one, she has the innate ability to counter a complete set of perks and items from survivors. If survivors bring Iron Whale, it will be a waste because for the most part, they will be coughing and making noise if the bugs are fixed. If survivors bring Self-Care, I don't need to tell you. If survivors bring Body Knowledge, I don't need to tell you. If survivors bring Will Make It, I don't need to tell you. All the healing perks and items, for the most part, largely useless against Plague. So if you see a lobby full of 4 medkits, bringing Plague is one of the best things you can do. Once people are infected, they become broken, and healing mechanics, for the most part, are out of the window. People will heal through the fountains, which is very quick but doesn't require any perks. And when they do that, they give you your power. But here's the thing, right? People used to have a very interesting strategy against Plague, which was not to cleanse. Everybody gets infected, they power through the infection, they do gens, and because they don't cleanse, the Plague doesn't get her power. And because she doesn't get her power, she can only be a killer that can infect people and mouse them one normally. Here's the problem though. The Plague has changed. A few months ago, they introduced a small buff to her that is actually very, very significant. Out of the 6 pools that spawn on the map, she now has 1 of them activated by default. This means that at any time, with no add-ons, the Plague can go to that pool, drink up, and be a killing machine. So if your team doesn't cleanse, and everybody is injured, and someone's on the hook, let's say, and she drinks from that, now you have a killer that can hit from several meters across several kinds of obstacles, and it can insta-down you. That's terrifying. That's really terrifying. And the thing is, this is with add-ons. She has 2 add-ons, the apples, that allow her to have one extra fountain activated each. This means that a Plague with 2 apples has 3 fountains at the start of the game. More if your team cleanses. Do you understand what this means? This means that the Plague at the start of the match can go drink up from one of these and have 3 minutes of being a better Huntress. That is fucking nutty. A good Plague can hit you over almost every loop in the game. There are very few loops in the game a Plague cannot do anything around. And the best thing you can do is to take a hit and run elsewhere. But unlike some other killers where they hit you and they're slow, the Plague barely slows herself down when she hits you with her power. Meaning that you will very, very often hit a survivor and then hit them again 3 seconds later. Especially if you have cooldown add-ons. Her power is scary. You can win games by just immediately drinking up and snowballing people with infectious fright. But, of course, again, higher level survivors, you can expect a few unbreakables here and there, so it's something that you cannot pull off every game, admittedly. So, that's how you play her, in my opinion. You use your power early to really, really knock the team down to its knees, and once that is done, you start infecting them selectively. And then they cannot heal, and then they must cleanse or be ready for more waves of your puke. I believe that when people spend several thousand hours on Plague, the way they do sometimes on Huntress, you will see some insane shit and see some of the crazy shots that Plague can do with her power. Her add-ons, all of them are pretty damn good. The apples, as I've mentioned, increase her potential to use fountains from the get-go, and are probably the stronger ones. But she's got plenty of other add-ons. Cooldown add-ons are really good. The add-ons that increase the effectiveness so that you can cast a survivor and they go through a window and you spit on them a bit and they're already fully infected are insanely good. Her ultra rares are super powerful. The rubbing oil that makes her basically spit out twice as much in half the time is really strong as well. Her add-ons are just really, really good. And if you play her correctly and you know what you're doing, she is a real threat. Now, all that being said, why is she in B tier rather than A tier? I don't think it would be crazy to place her higher and place her on A tier, but some things do hold her back. Number one, teams that have a lot of unbreakables will make it really hard for you to actually snowball. You'll down one survivor, and if the next survivor plays really well, it's not crazy that it will take you 20 seconds to down him. And in those 20 seconds, that first survivor that you down, he's out of the up with unbreakable. So that can hurt you a little bit. I played against teams of full unbreakable and I've still managed to win. because, you know, they run of Unbreakable once, and now the next time you do it, they cannot do it again. But it's something that does hurt her. The slugging doesn't always work. And when you don't slug, you are giving survivors some breathing space. So sometimes this can happen. Maps, I would say, for the most part, are fine. Even really bad maps, like, say, Ormond, have amazing loops where survivors cannot really do anything. Hunters might not be able to shoot over them, but you actually can. So it's really hard to loop a plague in even some really bad maps. That being said, there are some maps, especially with structures, where it's hard to use your power effectively because you actually have to go up in the building. And another thing that's worth mentioning is that her pools of devotion are randomly placed. Sometimes, let's say that you have one apple and you have 2 pools by default. Sometimes those 2 pools are in the middle of the map, and it's like amazing because you go there, you drink up, and there's 3 survivors right next to you. And sometimes they spawn in like super distant corners of the map, and that level of RNG is unfortunate. Unfortunate for you. So I would say those 2 things, for the most part, is what holds them back. What holds the plague back a little bit. Also, her endgame is a little bit weak. If you have made a blunder with some of the other killers, you can still come back. If you make a blunder with plague, and people finish all gems, and then they all start cleansing, that's a lot of healing that happens at once, and it's really hard to recover from. Something also worth mentioning. That being said, an amazing killer. If you want to sink a lot of hours into a killer that's very underappreciated and that survivors don't really expect at higher ranks and so on, please play the Plague. You will be glad you did. Another killer that has an insane skill ceiling, maybe even higher than Plague's, is the Deathslinger. Some people seem to be really divided. From what I've heard, people want him higher or lower. They're almost never happy that he's here. I have a hard time. To be completely honest, I think that a Deathslinger that played perfectly would probably be even bigger, be even higher, and could be in the A tier, no problem. Let's talk about his base kit, his add-ons, and so on. So, Deathslinger is a really good 1v1 killer. One of the best 1v1 killers, probably in the top 5 of 1v1ing. If he can see you and you are within 18 meters, he can pretty much injure you. That's it. If he can see you, he can shoot you. It's that simple. Especially the closer you are, this becomes even more true. If he can see you, he can injure you. He can shoot you, and, you know, either reel you in and hit you, or make the chain break in some way and injure you. And for the most part, once this has happened, if he can see you, he can't always down you, but in most maps, he will be able to very quickly. You will be forced to give up pallets super fast. You will be very, very, very picky with the windows that you choose to play around. Deathslinger can do some insane things, and unless you've seen a really good Deathslinger or seen a few dirty tricks, you don't even know how bad it is. Deathslinger can shoot through gaps and pull you around the loop. He can shoot you as you go through a window and then go out of a hole and then pull you through. There are so many tricks that good Deathslingers can do to hit you and down you from basically anywhere. On top of that, if he hits you and lets you go, you will be injured but also have to mend. And this is really, really important. Deathslinger is one of the best anti-healing killers in the game. Let's say that you have a lobby with 3 medkits, and the medkits have, you know, good add-ons and stuff, and people will heal very quickly. It doesn't even matter that they can heal quickly. With another killer, like say Ghostface, for example, that's coming right up, you hit a survivor, you leave them alone, you go for someone else, and that survivor can heal themselves in like 10 seconds. With Deathslinger, it's never going to be exactly like that, because even if they have really good medkits, they will always have to mend first. And this is both good and bad for you. If you chase that survivor, if you commit to that survivor, they don't need to mend because they keep running. We've explained that. So you will be wasting part of your ability. But if you are smart and keep juggling between survivors, you will have to keep everybody mending. And that's how Deathslinger wins games. He goes for survivor 1, hits them. Goes for survivors 2, hits them, reels them, now they have to mend. Goes for survivor 3, hits them, reels them, has to mend. Now he goes for survivor 1 once again, he downs them. Now he spots survivor 2 who was just finishing mending, goes for him, downs him again. He doesn't snowball the same way that some other killers do, who can insta-down and stuff, but he does put everyone in slightly precarious situations and slowly builds the situation where everybody's injured, no one can come for the save, and he can shoot you from 15 meters, actually 18 meters or more, so you cannot do anything in front of him. That's where his strengths really lie. I also need to mention that he has a very small terror radius of 24 meters, even smaller with monitor, which is a very good and popular pick. So his early game is very decent. His spook potential is quite high. Perks generally have good synergy on him. His add-ons are not crazy, but they're decent. He does have add-ons that enhance the mending time, that add mangled, that increase the reload and the penalty for missed shots. The add-ons are not crazy, but they're serviceable, and they make a base kit that's powerful slightly better. Is my interpretation of them. So they're nice. They don't bring him to... If Deathslinger had Huntress level add-ons, he would probably be higher very, very comfortably. But he doesn't. He doesn't have insta-downs. He doesn't have anything crazy. He doesn't have double shot or anything like that. If he had some add-ons like this, he would probably be easily on Huntress level, like, right off the bat. But his add-ons are more serviceable. They're more normal stuff. That being said, so what are the weaknesses of this guy? The weaknesses of this guy is very good teamwork, splitting up so that he can never get multiple people injured, and abusing the fact that for the most part, he will never be able to down you too quickly if you just hold W. What do I mean by this? This killer, as good as he might be, he can never insta-down you, other than with some perks or very quirky add-ons that are, for the most part, not always in play, right? So you take a hit, you run away. Once he catches up, you start going behind cover, you slow it down as much as possible, then he downs you, then he puts you on the hook, and now he's a slow killer that has to get around, who doesn't really use pop so well because he's slow and cannot teleport or move quickly. So you make his low speed and his hard time maneuvering around the map, you make that his weakness, and you just keep him running side to side, and you never let him injure multiple people or create the situations where he can thrive. That's how you beat a Deathslinger. And that is his weakness. That being said, good things about Deathslinger. Bad survivors will go down very quickly. Good survivors can also go down very quickly, potentially. And it only takes a few mistakes for the entire team to collapse. And the skill ceiling on this guy is unreal. If we get, and I hope we do, Deathslingers that are devoted, that just play him for like thousands and thousands of hours, it will be a treat to watch, I bet. Next up is Ghostface. And Ghostface is, I would say, the first of these killers that add-ons are actually really, really critical. If add-ons were not considered in this, Ghostface would drop down by a lot. Ghostface is a very powerful killer in my estimation, but add-ons have to be a part of it. Let me just tell you why this is. Ghostface has the ability to activate Night Shroud, lose his terror radius, lose his red stain, become a completely stealth killer that still moves at 115% movement speed, which is pretty nice. He has a really good... unlike Wraith, he can hit right away from his stealth, and unlike Pig, he's not slowed down at all. So it's a really good compromise of stealth and the ability to quickly down a survivor or quickly grab them or quickly injure them. So that's great. The problem is, there is a cooldown to this ability. If you get revealed by survivors, for example, you will have to wait 30 seconds by default. And this is bad, but you could be, well, what if you're really good and you never get revealed? It doesn't matter, because the cooldown is the same. If you down a survivor and you use an attack, 30 seconds. If you miss an attack, because you're a little bit boosted, 30 seconds. If you get spotted by a survivor before your attack, 30 seconds. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you play him well or bad, it's always 30 seconds cooldown, and that is awful. Imagine this. You find a survivor working on a generator. You quickly expose him with your power by leaning, and then you down him. Or maybe you grab him. And then you get revealed because you've done an attack. You put him on the hook. Now you see someone on barbecue or Thrill and Tremors, and you walk towards another person towards them to catch them off guard. You now have 15 seconds left until your power is back. That is awful. That is really bad. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how good of a Ghostface you are, you cannot really undo that or play around that fact. Here's where add-ons come in. When you have the best possible add-ons, which are the 2 recovery add-ons that give you the best, the Chute Pen and the Olsen Address Book, you recover in 16 seconds. 16 seconds. 16 seconds is amazing. That means that you can hook the Dwight, look around with barbecue, take a few steps, and then go back to stealth. And now the next guy that you find, you're either gonna stab immediately, grab as well, or go for a good lean kill on. This is also super useful when you're 99 people. At the start of the game, let's say, you find 3 survivors, 1 killing a gen, and you find a really good advantageous spot, and you lean, and you spot 3 of them, and you 99 them. You fill the mark to 99. Now you go for 1 of them, and leave the other ones for later. Now, throughout the game, these 2 guys will show up on and off, and you will have a chance to go from 99 to 100 and insta-down them. If you are unlucky, with no add-ons, when you bump into 1 of them, you might have to wait 30 seconds to stalk again, finish the job, and then down them. With add-ons, you will only at most be 16 seconds away from insta-downing these people that are 99. So basically, add-ons make this killer have his power use twice as much, basically, which is insane. So yeah, add-ons absolutely 100% require. Every other add-on, again, go watch the add-on video if you want to know more. Every other add-on is inferior to this type, and is pretty much not even considered. You need to play them with these add-ons for the most part. Now, when you do have these add-ons, what do we have on Ghostface? We have a killer who can have a monstrous start of the game. It is not unusual, with good judgment and good detection perks, for you to figure out where multiple survivors are at the start and insta-down many of them. Or insta-down 1 and leave another one that will be insta-down later because you 99 them. So he's a stealth killer that, unlike Pig, doesn't give a warning to survivors with the jigsaw boxes. That, unlike Myers, doesn't have a slow start of the game. That, unlike Wraith, can actually insta-down and go right into the action. So yeah, he's the best stealth killer at the start of the game, and I would argue throughout the match. He makes really good use of detection perks, of anti-healing perks, of even stall perks. He can play. He can take advantage of survivors having lack of communication or even bad communication. This is something that will happen constantly. You stalk a survivor to 99. They are healthy, and because everybody else is injured, they come for the rescue thinking that they're safe. But you come out of a corner, 99 to 100, down them, and now the entire team is in shambles. They thought that I was gonna get this rescue, they're gonna finish healing. Nope. Now, think again. Everybody has to reposition, change their plans. You will crash into survivor strategies very often when they're solo, but also when they're organized, which is amazing. There are also many spots that good Ghostfaces learn that are super cheesy. There are many main buildings with gaps that you can look through that the average survivor doesn't even know about, and that even advanced survivors cannot really look out for it all the time. So yeah, many spots where you can stalk people in super cheeky ways, many smart plays that you can do in chase to expose a survivor, especially when you recover fast enough. The fact that you can hide your red glow at almost any time with good add-ons in a chase means that you can do some mind games in tiles. That, and with the crouching, you can do some mind games that other killers cannot do, and that is amazing. Even good survivors, need to be down if they're injured already, and knowing one mind game can make the difference between downing the survivor right now or making them drop 6 pallets and 3 gens get down in the distance. So that's really good. What are some other things that are worth considering? Yes, some people believe that Spine Shield counters this killer. It's not true. Good Ghostfaces will pick up on the fact that some survivors use Spine Shield. You can see it happen. You can see it happen, or you can even guess prematurely. And there are ways you can fool Spine Shield. You can, instead of, let's say that a Claudette is on a generator and she has Spine Shield and I guess it or I suspect it. Instead of finding a place to lean from to spot her from afar where she would see it, especially once she knows that it's a Ghostface, what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach that gen, moving my camera in a very specific way, that I might show you in some video later, where Spine Shield, I'll still see what's going on, but Spine Shield will not be triggered. And I can do that, and I can get a grab, or I can show up from right around the corner and hit her, or show up from right around the corner and 99 her, or expose her, etc. So you can absolutely play around most perks. Object of Obsession is a nasty perk, but this is one of the killers that plays around it the best. And when it comes to map dependency, this killer is amazing. He has very few bad maps. You know, there's the occasional Blood Lodge, super open maps, the occasional Rotten Fields, even though you can do some sick things in Khorne that survivors don't generally know about. But for the most part, the average map is good on Ghostface. Some rough maps are still really good on Ghostface. He can do well in maps like Haddonfield because of the many chances to stalk through windows and stuff like that. And then he has a few maps that are so good that are pretty much free wins. Indoor maps on this killer are amazing, whereas with some of the other killers, indoor maps could be a hit or miss. Every time you go to a map like Hawkins with this killer, where he can stalk through the window panels, he can stalk through the catwalks, it's so good. He has a few maps that are incredibly good on him, and overall, the only thing that keeps him from being higher, I guess, is the fact that survivors occasionally have good teamwork, that occasionally you will get these bad maps, and that, you know, survivors sometimes relay information well, and you cannot slug them forever because of Unbreakable and stuff like that. I guess that's pretty much it. If you play him flawlessly, which again, I think is quite hard. This is one of the killers where if you make mistakes, you are punished the most, especially without add-ons again. But if you play him flawlessly, he's a really strong killer. And you should find a decent amount of success. I certainly enjoy him. A shame that his add-ons don't really get any better, and that his ultra-rares are gimmicky, and that, you know, there's not much variety. But other than that, very fun killer. And next we go to our boy Billy, and holy fuck has he fallen from the top. Old Billy was easily top of the A tier because of his add-ons, basically. He had no overheat system, so that wasn't a concern. The new overheat system is pretty lax, that's great. You don't really overheat with Billy too much, so that's not an issue anymore, thanks to the fact that the devs listen to the PTB feedback. So the overheating is not a huge deal, but they took away many things from Billy. Old Billy had charged add-ons that he could combine with the movement speed add-ons, the engravings, or with other charge add-ons. So you pretty much had two varieties of Billy. You had the Cracked Billy, which is a combination of charge and movement speed. So this was a Billy that had a chainsaw that was pretty fast, either normal speed or a bit faster than normal, in charging, and then move really quickly. So you would have a Billy hold his chainsaw on a loop, and then he would be like, and he would curve around it and move so fast that you realistically had no time. And these Billys were really powerful, and against the bad average survivors, these Billys, they ate up those groups of survivors. They really made quick work of them. Now, the smarter, more experienced survivors could play around it as well, but he was still a force to be reckoned with. So that was powerful, but what was even more powerful, in my opinion, and I think, you know, other people's opinions as well, was double charge Billy, aka Instasaw Billy. So instead of taking 2.5 seconds with the Instasaw, I think that you reduce something crazy, like almost a full second out of it. That means that Billy can use his chainsaw basically to get you, if you're the slightest in the open. Unless you're already humping a window, Instasaw Billy could get you anywhere, which was ridiculous. Very little counterplay, extremely punishing for mistakes. You would have to give him every pallet and hope to God he didn't bring bamboozle on windows, etc, etc, etc. Curbing, map mobility, insta-down potential means that anybody's just one mistake away from giving him a proper snowball. Ability to peek into lockers with, you know, with his when he ends his charge and look through walls. Many other things. Now, what has been taken away from Billy? Not that much. The heating system is not terrible, but they've taken away the charge add-ons. The current add-ons on Billy, you still have the engravings, but if you want to use the engravings, now your chainsaw takes longer, which means that if survivors play around windows, they're harder to use and for the most part not worth it. And his charge add-ons, they don't really exist anymore. There's a charge add-on that makes him 4.4, which I don't need to tell you, that's horrible. Reduces his speed, not good. And there's a charge add-on that works after you get stunned for 30 seconds, which, I mean, it's cool, but it's 30 seconds and only if you get pellet stun, and yeah, it's not great. It's not consistent. So for that reason, charge add-ons, crab dance, they're gone. And that is bad. That is really bad. That means that current Billy, other than the stealth add-ons aside a little bit, is old Billy without add-ons. How good is that? It's quite good. It's quite good. A really, 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 really good Billy, and I've seen many, can play without add-ons and can make each survivor have to sweat their balls off and play super safe. But here's the thing. Survivors can sweat their balls off and play super safe. So a Billy without add-ons, you can just give him every pallet. Vault every window. Because he has to play so perfectly and he has so very little help from the add-ons, competent survivors can run you for a while. And if the map is not on your favor and your mobility doesn't help you that much and the gens are flying, you will find that new Billy, as strong as he is, he doesn't compete with other killers that use add-ons to more effect. He could potentially be a little bit higher, but if you're assuming that you're playing against decent survivors, new Billy will struggle a little bit. Now, his new add-ons do include a few fun things. He has a few add-ons to lose his stereo radios, to become stealthier, stuff like that. That's kind of cute. I like it. It's not bad. I suspect, though, that against survivors who are on comms, who are a little bit smart, they'll pick up on the fact. You know, if Billy can become undetectable for 15 seconds after downing someone, and this becomes the new meta, trust me, survivors will pick up really quickly. And they'll realize that, hey, maybe after someone goes down, if I don't hear a hook, maybe I should, you know, not be in the open during a gen where he can chainsaw me right away, you know. I don't think his current kit will be able to put him back to the level he was before. If you want to play Billy, I hope that you were used to old Billy without add-ons. And even then, he's an amazing killer. Good mobility, balance of, you know, M1 if they play tight, M2 if they make a mistake, or if you outplay them. And that's great. You will be a little bit frustrated, though, if you were used to the old Billy and how his add-ons made his chainsaw a lot more threatening during chase. Still, though, not bad at all. Next up, we got Doctor. Doctor's got some great anti-stealth capabilities. He's one of the killers that can stay in the flow for the most part. Counters, you probably, if we're assuming that you're playing against good survivors, you're not going to have a lot of blendies and a lot of survivors who hide a lot. But occasionally you will have that kind of person, and Doctor, for the most part, plays against these characters quite well, which is great. He also is a pretty good monster in chase. He can deny survivors who play not so smart by camping pallets, waiting at the wrong side of the window, etc. will be very quickly noped out of existence by a good Doctor. The problem is that if we assume that survivors play smart, they will rarely do this. They will not sit on the pallet, allow themselves to be shocked and then hit. They will constantly counter loop you and make it really, really hard. That being said, you can still make some crazy reads, and even good survivors will struggle against a good Doctor on occasion. And his add-ons are quite nice. His add-ons... Oh, forgive me, I've just noped the microphone. His add-ons do a number of things. They increase his range, which can let him deny the occasional hook save and play around some loops in different ways from a bit more of a distance. Makes him a bit more versatile. With no penalty now, thank goodness, they made the add-ons much better. They give him all kinds of side effects that are actually really powerful, even against good survivors. You can choose a survivor who's in a really good spot, put him in Madness Tier 3 with Discipline, for example. I believe it's Discipline, yeah? I believe it's Discipline. Put him in Madness Tier 3, hit him once, now he's in a good spot, you pretend to go away, and he starts to snap out of Madness Tier 3. But what does he know? Because he's in Madness Tier 3, he constantly hears your terror radios. So he doesn't know that you're actually going around, coming from behind, and boom, slapping him, because he cannot hear your terror radios. That kind of stuff works. The fact that there's add-ons that make your terror radios sound like it's in the distance, that make illusions appear that you can see and track, all of those information that they give you, all of this misinformation that it feeds the survivors works great. It works against solo survivors really well, and it works against full teams as well, as they will be given misinformation constantly, and you will be taking advantage of it. So he's got a little bit of stall with his tier 3, he's got great detection, a little bit of anti-loop, and some really beefy add-ons as they go up. The discipline add-on, on top of giving them the noise of being chased, also reduces the detonation of your shock, which means that if you're on a loop and you have multiple of these or one of these add-ons, you can shock them and they scream quicker, which means that they cannot drop the pallet or vault the window as fast. This helps a lot in chase, one of the stronger add-ons. Then the ultra rares are beefy and very oppressive. Great add-ons overall, good base power in general. The one thing that keeps the Doctor from being a stronger killer, lethality. The Doctor does not have the innate ability of downing survivors ultra fast. He needs perks like Save the Best for Last to whack a survivor, then whack him again quickly. Make your choice, Hunt the Ground, Know It, all these perks to actually down survivors. If survivors play a similar strategy to Deathslinger, and they just take a hit and then run really far away into a corner of the map while their teammates do gens elsewhere, it's hard for the Doctor to sometimes keep up with the game. And again, good survivors can even make a good Doctor have to struggle a little bit. You will damn and condemn latency every other game. Sometimes you'll do a perfect shock and the survivor will still vault through because his connection said that he already pressed space. He does have some issues like that on current servers, which is unlucky. It's not client-side at all. So your shocks need to be a little bit generous. You need to do them a little bit before with a bit of room for error and assume that sometimes survivors will get away with it. But for the most part, a very solid, balanced, strong killer. Add-ons scale up fine, they're pretty strong. He has a few bad maps. He doesn't really have maps that counter his power much. Some of them are actually quite good, the indoor ones. Maps where he can make some pallets that are normally slightly unsafe, completely unsafe. So once you drop certain pallets against the Doctor, he shocks you once, he goes from the side that you're on, and he whacks you. Other killers will have to maybe waste a few seconds, so he's quite good at doing these things. The only thing that's missing on him, of course, is an ability to insta-down or really ramp up or really stall the game. That being said, he's a very, very strong character. Next up, Cannibal. One of the harder ones to place. You wouldn't think he's moved much from the previous incarnation, but he's actually moved a fair amount, in my opinion. I think he sits comfortably in B tier. Let me tell you right now, Cannibal chews through bad teams. I think survivors, as of right now, for the most part, do not know how to play against this killer. They are still learning the things that they cannot do, or maybe they still have the vestigial knowledge from previous Cannibal, and they're playing as if this was previous Cannibal. I had so many games where I just eat through the survivors and kill them all in like 3 seconds because they just play badly. But we go to assume that survivors will be smart, and some out of these smart survivors, you know, they can already figure out how to play against this killer. So what is up with the new Cannibal? I won't be talking much about the old one, but all you need to know is that old Cannibal was very simple. You need to charge add-ons to make his Chenso as quickly as possible, and some perks here and there to help him catch up or surprise survivors. That was basically it. If you were close enough to the survivor, you rep your Chenso right at their back and down them. And if you were good enough at doing that consistently, Cannibal was pretty damn good. New Cannibal is a lot more nuanced. It's no longer a binary outcome of, oh, you're close, Chenso. Oh, you're far, no Chenso, have to M1 or save it for the next one. It's definitely a lot more nuance. Now you can use because your Chenso doesn't slow you down as much, and because it can go for so much longer and it's so much quicker, you can actually use your Chenso at medium range of sorts, not being completely up in the butt of the survivor. You can actually do it from a few meters and do a bit of back and forth. You can start your Chenso and then go on an unexpected way and then end it prematurely or keep going, and survivors have to be smart. Before, survivors, when they got to a pallet, if you were a bit far, they could keep running. Now they actually have to give you the pallet, because if they keep running, there's a really good chance you're gonna use your Chenso and catch up before they make a full lap and and reach the pallet again. So they have to give you pallets very, very early, for the most part, and they must play around windows well. That's why I think Bamboozle on this Cannibal, on the new one, is insanely good. Using Bamboozle to strategically deny the few windows that you hopefully get will make them have to play against pallets, and at that point they either give you the pallet or they give you the down. A few mind games, a few tricks, and you get downs very consistently. If survivors mess up a little bit, new Cannibal is really good at hitting multiple of them. So basement is really powerful. If they go into lockers, it's a lost cause. You can yoink them out one way or another. The counterplay to him is a little bit more advanced, but it's still there. Survivors can still play well around windows, and they can still give you pallets. Survivors giving you pallets doesn't really mean anything. If their teammates are on gens and they stay safe, that is sometimes not good enough. Yeah, okay, now they have no pallets, but it doesn't matter because there's only one gen left and they all have DS, and you know, they're gonna power through it. So there's definitely counterplay, which is what keeps him, I would say, on B tier. His add-ons, I think, are decent. They extend the reach of his Chienzo by making it go further. They increase the speed at the cost of charge. There's the light chassis, for example, is really good. Shows you the auras of people nearby. You can use that in mind games and all sorts of with all sorts of tricks. There's some really cool stuff. The ultra seem decent. They don't seem extremely game-changing. He doesn't seem to need the add-ons, but they're definitely helpful and keep him up with the other killers. Potentially, this killer could be maybe slightly better than Doctor. I have a hard time believing that he'll ever be better than Billy, although there are situations where he is better than Billy. In some loops, he, I think, has more potential than Billy, which is crazy to think about. That being said, unlike Billy, he doesn't have the traversal and the map mobility. Unlike Doctor, he doesn't have that anti-stealth for the most part. So he is a killer that needs perks and who needs to play good and who will suffer from a few mistakes here and there. But he's still perfectly good on average. Next up is Demogorgon, which is a shame to see this low. I think this is the killer that most people ask me about and wonder why he is so low. Demogorgon's main issue is that he's just quite average and that his add-ons do not scale well. His best add-on by far is a brown add-on called the Rat Liver. You can watch the add-on video again to know more about it. The Rat Liver makes him a little bit better in chase. It allows him to use his shred more liberally and from further and do it quicker on corners and stuff like that, which makes your shred amazing. And you have the same issue as, say, Doctor. You can play around some loops and get some hits, but they still need to... but you still need to hit survivors twice. That being said, this killer has some tricks up its sleeve. He can play Save the Best for Last really, really well, because he never needs to hit the obsession. He can always shred or grab the obsession. Anytime you can hit the obsession, realistically, you can shred them. So that makes Save the Best for Last an amazing pick on him. Only the very best teams will make it so that Save the Best for Last is hard to use. The very best teams will loop you so tight that every hit will need to be a shred. And if every hit is a shred, you're not getting stacks to Save the Best for Last. And by the time they've done 4 gens, you have only a few stacks and it's hard to use. But only the very best few teams can accomplish that. For the average match, Save the Best for Last is amazing lethality and will help you in your chases. But yeah, every other add-on, I'm not going to say it's useless, but they're basically not to the level of other killers. So his add-ons are not very serviceable, and he's got 2 powers that, while they're good, they do not keep up with other killers for the most part. Good survivors on maps where your shred is not that useful, maybe some loops that are circular when you cannot really shred, will expose just how average this killer can feel. His mobility with portals is really nice if you're smart in placing them and double them up and hide them well. You can really make survivors either give up entirely on disarming them or waste time doing so. So mobility of maps is great. Some maps like Haddonfield, where you need to go up multiple floors or platforms, this killer can handle better than the average, which is nice. But it still takes time. It still takes time. You at the start setting a few portals, it's you not having a good grasp on the survivor's position at the start, and you wasting a little bit of time. Not to the same level as Trapper, for example, but wasting time still. It is a killer that is just good at a few things, but not great at any in particular. That's why I think he belongs at the top of the C tier. His most notable ability, in my opinion, is to catch good survivors in some loops relatively quickly with your shred, especially with the Rat Liver. But then, even then, good survivors will just keep running, make it really hard for you to get that first down or get a snowball going. His stealth is really not there when he teleports through his portals. There's a huge sound cue that survivors can hear, and most survivors will put 2 and 2 together and look out for it and never really get caught off guard. Most of the good ones anyway. So his kit could use a bit of a buff and his add-ons could use a bit of a rework. if he is to keep up. That being said, is the Demogorgon or any of the killers that follow after him weak? No, Demogorgon is perfectly good. Good Demogorgons out there, kick-ass, can win most games consistently. But that's because they're really good, and because the killer is decent. That doesn't mean, however, that it's not one of the lower rated killers in this tier list. Any of the killers that are coming up are all perfectly decent, and are all perfectly viable, so please don't think otherwise. Next up, we got Legion, which some people would place at the very bottom. I disagree. I have a fondness for Legion. I never liked it too much, but I started getting good at Legion more and more so at the start of this year. Started to develop my own playstyle with them, and I've realized a lot of strengths that I didn't know were there. Legion has the really nice ability, right from the bat, of never chasing a healthy survivor. If you play Legion well, all of your chases will be against injured survivors, who without Iron Whale are noisy, and who on average, when they're injured, they play a bit more safe, and they are more prone to make panic moves. What do I mean by this? His power, the Feral Frenzy, is relatively easy to use. Even good survivors, as long as you're playing well and not making any blunders, even good survivors cannot do anything against it. You see a Claudette and a Meg that sprint bursts away, you hit the Claudette, and because you refill your power, you will catch up to the Meg, even with sprint burst. And it doesn't matter how good the Meg is, for the most part, unless they do some sick spin and you have a bit of a silly moment, for the most part, you will get everybody injured, and then you will cancel, and then you will be a normal killer that only has mind games and the short stature to get the ball rolling. So this is where people take issue with Legion, and they are completely right. Once the Legion is out of his power, other than some extremely 1 in a million situations, his power doesn't really help him get it down. There are some times where you will be stunned out of your power, and then with Enduring you'll get a grab, or you'll be able to bloody block someone with your power. These are very rare, and again, for the most part, depend on the survivor making a mistake. Survivors who play smart, for the most part, you will never be able to down them using a quick some smart trick with your power. You know, people sometimes, you know, you hit them, you pretend to go around, they start mending, you go around the corner and hit them, and they don't pay attention. But let's assume the survivors are competent. You need to down them normally, and that is quite rough, right? But again, it's like Oni. Oni needs to get a normal hit, and he's still one of the stronger killers in the game. Because after that hit, he gets a lot of power. And the nice thing about Legion is that you only need to get one hit. Many other killers, like the ones we've seen or the ones we'll see, they need to get a hit, and then they need to get another hit. And that's what they do. With Legion, you will only need to get one hit on the injured survivor. This is really good, because if the survivor bluffs, and they think that you're going to respect the pallet and you don't, they go down. If the survivor tries to do something smart, like a quick 360, or getting into a locker, you get them. They're done. If the survivor tests you and tries to do some stupid thing that you see coming, you hit them. So survivors who try to test you, who try to do something that would work on a newer killer, will immediately go down. Survivors who are new and who are not so good, obviously will also immediately go down. And if you pull off a mind game, that's it. You don't need to pull off 2 mind games. Now they're down on the ground, which is great. So Legion would be very rewarding for the player that can look out for these things and rise above the average. One thing that's wonderful about Legion is that once people are injured, they cannot immediately go back to doing gens. The deep wound that Legion inflicts with his power lasts 30 seconds. So late game, it's not that great. A survivor that you hit with deep wound, they can open an exit gate and get out before they bleed out. Or they can finish a generator that's like nearly done and get out. But at the start of the match, they cannot really afford to do this. So whereas with other killers, you chase 1 survivor and 3 gens are being done in the distance, with Legion, for the most part, if you play it well, you will chase 1 survivor, injure, now cancel your power, now maybe even chase the 4th, injured, and now they've already wasted 1 medkit, they've already dropped 2 pallets for some reason, even though they still got injured, and now you have 1 person that's healed and used a medkit, 2 people that are mending, and 1 guy that's being chased. No gen progress being done. If you have Ruin, amazing value. If you have Pop, you will probably, if you seal the deal quickly and finish a gen, finish a chase and go for the gen, you will probably save a gen or 2. Really, really good synergy with perks. Add-ons are not incredible, but they do increase his power, his stall, his duration to a large degree. Double duration Legion on some maps is almost a guaranteed 4 hit every time, because they just give him so much damage and he's so fast. And here's the thing again that I mentioned. Survivors who think they are too smart, who try to drop pallets, will most likely do a really bad favor to their team. With other killers, let's say you play Bubba, and the survivors are super conservative. They drop every pallet. They drop every single pallet. Well, you eat all the pallets, and now maybe you win, maybe you lose the game. With Lesion, they drop the pallets, but you still injure them. And if that guy is dropping pallets, all you need to do is injure him and use your ability to detect other people. And if you don't want to chase this guy, you go chase another guy. Another amazing thing on Lesion that is very, very overlooked by most people is his ability to actually find people that you want to find. How many times have you been in a situation where it's a big map, perhaps, and you're like, okay, the Dwight is there on hook. If I kill the Dwight, I can handle the other 3 survivors and maybe win this. Where's the Dwight? Where's the Dwight? This is a Claudette. This is a Meg. Where's the Jake? Where's the Dwight? Where's the Dwight? You cannot find him because he's being sneaky. He's got spine chill or he's on comms, and every time he hears your terror radius, the slightest hint of your terrorist, he hides in a locker. Never to be seen again. With Lesion, there's no hiding from him. Once he uses his power, he will routinely detect people and routinely figure out who is who by process of elimination or by seeing them directly after a short time. So Lesion is very, very good at focusing on that weak link and finding them no matter what, which is a really, really strong ability of his, and why I think he is slightly better than people give him credit for. All of those things together make Lesion quite a consistent killer. We have a 52 win streak on Lesion. Without add-ons, which I think is pretty telling. It doesn't say that he's better than anybody else, but it does say that he's not too bad, so hopefully you'll give him a shot. Next up is Michael, which some people really regret seeing down here. Why is Michael so down in the tier list? He's not bad by any means. Let me have a look at the time. Yeah, I think we'll have time to more or less finish this before the stream starts. Right, so why is Michael so low in the tier list? Some things to be considered. Number 1, the strongest Michael add-on, I am not considering. I think his strongest, most OP add-on is probably the broken, the tombstone piece. The tombstone piece is ridiculous. It's a purple add-on that allows you to just straight up murder a survivor. So you start the match, you stalk someone a little bit, not even that much, just a little bit. Then you go up to a survivor, and it's like an instant mori. That I think is super broken. And if I did consider that add-on, and some of the other add-ons that support that kind of playstyle, helping it, I would probably put Michael even higher. But most Michaels on Tombstone, they don't do weird stuff like that, right? So I'll be judging him just on his most average add-ons, the ones that make you stalk at a higher rate, the ones that reduce your tail radius, the rabbit, and maybe the occasional other add-on here and there. So once you have that, what do you have in Michael? Why is he a comparable killer to Ghostface, lower than Ghostface at such a margin? Michael's early game is fucking terrible. Let me just put it that way. You need to stalk for 5 seconds up close with no add-ons. Add-ons make it a bit better. It's more like 4 seconds. You need to stalk someone from up close for 5 seconds to get out of tier 1. This is ridiculous. If they have object, they'll know it's a stealth killer and they'll figure out it's possibly a Michael. If they have spine chill, it will be really hard to fool them when you move so slowly. If you're unlucky and you just get spotted by one of them, or all of them, or one of them that calls you out to the rest, and they move smart, early game Michael is rough. You really want to bring Corrupt Intervention, or Whispers, or Discordance, or something to let you know where survivors are, or force them out of hiding. Because getting out of that tier 1 is extremely critical. The early game, as I've explained in my tips video for like, advanced tips for every killer should know, blah, blah, blah. The early game is extremely crucial. Early on, your best possible thing that you could be doing is downing a survivor and then going for another, or downing a survivor, hooking him immediately and going for another, or chasing one survivor and bothering 2 others near a gen. You want to bother multiple people. Michael has no such ability. If you're running to 3 survivors as Ghostface, worst case scenario, you stab one real quick because they surprise you, and then you chase the rest and they're all bothered. Best case scenario, you lean stalk all of them and you 99 all of them, and maybe you even mark 1 or 2 and down them all. That's great. With Michael, you don't have the ability to quickly stalk multiple people because the stalking doesn't add up like the way it doesn't scale up with multiple people. Instead, you just have to chase one and get out of tier 1 as quickly as possible. Yes, you could theoretically try to go and grab someone, but if it fails, and with dedicated servers it will fail, now you're out of luck. You have to hit him, you're a very slow killer in tier 1, he can loop you around places where you cannot see him in some maps. So yeah, it's rough. Getting out of tier 1, at best, it happens quickly and effortlessly, which is not great, but it's better. At worst, it takes a long time. Gens get done in the distance. You have no surprise effect. And yeah, it's quite bad. Tier 1 Myers, I wish was a resource rather than a hindrance, but right now it is a hindrance. So his early game is already limited. The very best case scenario for you is to find a survivor doing a gen and stalk them from some corner where they don't realize for some reason, and then you get into tier 1 and then you start downing people. Other killers can do so much better than that. So early game Michael is really, really, really unfortunate. So after that, what does Michael have? Michael has a reduced 60 meter terror radius, which is pretty nice. You can make that even smaller with Monitor and Abuse / Dead Rabbit add-on, which is nice. Having a small terror radius is good. In some maps, it's actually really strong, the close ones for the most part. In some maps, not so much. Bloodlodge Myers is miserable. What are you gonna do? Stalk on people that can see you from across the entire map? Temple, you know, maps like that have long lines aside, not so good for Myers. He cannot approach and use his terrors effectively, but it is there and it's a nice thing. Once he gets to tier 3, his terrors goes a little bit higher and he increases. In tier 2 he has a slightly faster vaulting. In tier 3 he has a even faster vaulting speed, and he also has an extended launch that, believe it or not, makes a difference. Survivors cannot play the same against tier 3 Myers because of the vaulting and because of the longer launch. It does help you a little bit in chase. Here's the problem with Myers. All-time Myers, it wasn't crazy for Myers a year or 2 years ago to tier up, down a survivor, go for another survivor, down him, infectious fright, down another survivor, oh, all survivors down. This doesn't quite work nearly as consistently anymore. Myers is a snowball killer that doesn't have an amazing killer power to snowball with, and who has to deal with anti-snowball perks from survivors. And what do I mean by this? Unbreakable, for the most part, DS, you know, all these perks that can rob you of momentum. If you're down a survivor who's in a survivor friends and they have infectious, this playstyle that was really his thing doesn't quite work anymore, unfortunately. He has some really fun perk synergies. He uses search and surveillance quite well. He, you know, with corrupt, you can minimize some of the early game issues, for example. You can keep the game alive with search. You can use your stealth with run and surveillance. There are some cute things you can do. And Myers is a good killer. He's not bad, but I don't think he's at the level of the other ones above him. Quite honestly, imagine you go on a map like Bloodlodge or Gas Heaven, a map like this, where the average survivor is looping you in tiles where, yeah, maybe you can stalk a little bit, but what are you gonna do once you have your tier 3? They can just loop you, drop the pallet plate, super safe, and make it really, really hard to get out of tier 1 on occasion. A decent killer with whose add-ons actually help quite a bit, but that I consider to be below the other ones I've mentioned. If you think that the insta-downing a survivor is the hottest shit ever, play Legion, use your power, and you'll see just how tough it is to actually finish the job sometimes. That being said, add-ons that are notable on him, rate increasing add-ons are good. It means that, you know, if they make a mistake, you get out of tier 1 super quick, you get into tier 3 immediately, and getting into tier 3 immediately, I think, is the best thing you can do. Then you hit someone and you have pop, thrill and tremors, or search and surveillance, or you have ruin and you slug them, you know, get your perks working up. That's how you play Myers. Easier said than done sometimes. Next up is Trapper. Trapper has a similar issue as Myers. He is a snowballing killer with a power that doesn't really help so much as snowballing at times, and in a meta where snowballing is really difficult because of all the anti-slugging perks and so on. That being said, let's go over the strengths of Trapper. Trapper is a little bit like Hack, in so that if survivors don't bother you at the start, that can work out for you. Smart trappers will place traps that will not be triggered just randomly, because if they are triggered randomly throughout the match, you might be there, you might not be there, they might escape in 2 seconds, they might escape in 2 minutes, nobody knows, right? The smart trappers will identify the spots where survivors do not walk through when navigating the map, but do walk through when they're looping you. So at the start of the match, in that little downtime before people figure out that it's a trapper, unfortunately they see your bear traps on the ground, so they'll figure it out, or they can use object and so on. But before people figure out what's going on, a trapper will set up a few of these traps, only a few, you cannot afford to do much more, and use perks like Whispers, Corrupt Intervention to minimize the damage, you know, minimize the possibility of a survivor running into you early and disarming your traps, or minimize the 3 gens being worked on immediately. Old Ruin was really good on Trapper. Unfortunately, it's gone now. But yeah, he puts that at the start of the match, then throughout the match, identifying the times where survivors are not really looking at you. You will put down a few other traps. Really good trappers, in my opinion, also know how to use traps in a chase. Some people think that the trapper has no chasing power, and that's not true. You go to a survivor that's in a corner of the map, on a loop, on a loop that's in the corner. They get to the pallet, you pre-drop the, you preset the trap, and now they're in a tough spot. If they let you put down that trap and stay in the loop, they're gonna get a hit or down if they're injured. If they start running away, you can be smart, let go of the trap, and then immediately catch them if they've committed to a long, to running to somewhere else and are caught in the open. So there's a lot of things you can do in chase to put traps down. If survivors don't have effective communication, Trapper is so great. You chase them to a pallet, they drop the pallet, and you avoid the stun by pre-setting the trap. Now you chase them somewhere else. You do a mind game and you down them. Put them on the hook. Someone comes for the rescue. You chase them and they go to the same pallet that's out of the trap. And you're like, gotcha. They step on the pallet. Bam, hit them. Third survivor now has to come. The fourth survivor that was doing a gen is wondering, what the hell is my team doing? I need to go. Steps on a trap that was randomly in the path. All of these things can happen. And when they do happen, it feels great. Trapper is an inconsistent killer because of his power, because of the map, because of the... We'll get to the perks that survivors can bring. But when he works, he is extremely satisfying. Still my favorite killer to play. Now, what can go wrong with Trapper? Assuming that you bring the best perks and everything, map is rough on Trapper. In some maps, survivors will see you from anywhere. In some maps, there's zero grass, and the places to put traps are very, very limited. You'll need to be quite creative and squish your brain a little bit and figure out where survivors are going to go and how the hell you can put a trap in on concrete where it stands out a lot in a way that survivors will not immediately see. You have to deal with people running Object of Obsession and calling out your traps. You have to deal with people being smart and doing basic things that you should do against trappers, such as not stepping on grass outside of chase, looking at your feet if you're going to go through a window outside of chase. If you're in a chase and you're healthy, taking a hit and avoiding the area that he's very clearly prepared, forcing him to not chase you. If survivors do these things and they're smart, they will give you a hard time. Every perk in the game that is good in general, Adrenaline, Dead Hard, Sprint Burst, Object when used in a team, is particularly good against Trapper. You can Dead Hard through traps, you can Adrenaline and tank a hit on a trap, DS works if you grab someone out of a trap, BT works when someone's on a trap. If they're just escaping and you hit them, they'll get the speed boost and run away. It's rough. It's rough. He has so much counterplay, and I haven't even gotten to the worst counterplay yet. The survivor item rainbow map and the normal map. These items can actually highlight the traps that he places. The rainbow map does it by default, and the green map does it if you have the red twine add-on equipped. If you have a survivor who plunders or who brings a map, playing Trapper is a nightmare. That survivor can just go around, and if he's smart, he'll just use his power on and off and see the traps. If he has the crystal bead add-on, he can show that same information to every other survivor, even if they're not on comms. It's rough. It's rough. Lots of counterplay for Trapper, RNG based power. You can lock down some areas. When you win quite bigly, and you can secure the 4K by trapping Exegates, have a decent game, end game, which most killers can't boast about. But rough early game, inconsistent. You ultimately need to predict survivors, and even then, you know, other killers, when they predict survivors, they get better results. So yeah. That being said, add-ons. I'm assuming that you're playing with add-ons. Without add-ons, Trapper is absolutely miserable, but I'm assuming that you're bringing add-ons to increase your capacity, which are pretty much the must-haves, and then some utility add-ons like setting speed, darkening add-ons, which I think are bugged right now, but we'll assume that they'll get fixed. Or some of the spicy ultra rares, which are alright, but not super strong from my experience, and I play Trapper more than I play every other killer. That being said, is he a good killer? Yeah, he's still fine. You will find it a little bit harder as you play against the better survivors, however. Next up is Pig. And Pig has pretty much 3 abilities, all of which end up being underwhelming in my opinion. She's still a fun killer, and if you watch some of the best Pigs out there, they will make her look really, really good. So what are her abilities? She has the stealth ability of crouching. Unlike Wraith, unlike Ghostface, she has a very big penalty to movement speed, moving at around 90% movement speed, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 92. This is quite bad. This means that you cannot stealth around the map as you navigate. You need to stealth with a purpose. That being said, there are some ways you can do this. You can use barbecue and chili, guess where they are, and stealth there. You can use the combo of monitor and abuse and whispers to detect them, not let them hear your terror radius, crouch and approach them. That's a pretty reliable and basic combo. You can also use surge surveillance or ruin surveillance to know where people are working on gens reliably, or gearhead or whatever else you want, to know where you're going and use your stealth. So her stealth, decent, but not amazing. On top of that, she's got her ambush, which typically you don't really use it out of stealth. You don't usually stealth into ambush. You usually stealth into M1 or stealth into grab attempt. But her ambush is used mostly in chase. You track a survivor to a pallet. He drops the pallet. He's in one of those awkward pallets, and now you crouch. You use your power, and you hit. This is the biggest problem with her, in my opinion. Her ambush is weak in chase. She can get hits in places where other killers would have a harder time or would have a slightly longer time securing it, and she can do it a bit quicker. But other than that, it's not an effective tool. If a survivor is a little bit ambitious and they go past the pallet, and you sit on the pallet and then you crouch, there's many the survivor can just run away to a different loop. And unless you have some of the best add-ons and a really good guess, you will lose distance and have to catch up to them. But you could argue, well, you forced them out of that pallet, so that's good. Not really. I would much rather down them there. But what if this pallet is isolated? What if it's in a corner of the map? Yes, if it's in a corner of the map, then you can sit on the pallet and then get a hit by using your ambush and threatening to go each way. Here's the problem. Survivors, the good ones, know this. So what they're going to do is drop the pallet. If survivors keep pre-dropping pallets, using your ambush in pallets is almost impossible. It's frustrating because they take away the very little, the very little chasing potential that you have. And good survivors will use this. And the problem with her powers is that they interact with each other as well. Her third power is the stall. She places reverse bear traps that you can see right here. And they can stall a survivor for anywhere from 30 to 2.5 minutes, which is pretty good. It's not bad. The problem is that for you to set these traps on people, and for these people to be affected and so on, you need to catch them first. And the pig, out of all these killers, might be the killer that has the hardest time on average catching someone, unless she has a really good stealth. Again, I don't think your stealth is great. If you have object, or if people see that it's a pig because you have jigsaw boxes all over the map, they will look out for it. Spine chill, for the most part, will foil your plans to stealth people. Unlike Wraith or Ghostface, you cannot fool spine chill as easily, because yes, you can look away at a gen, but you're not approaching it very fast. So if you look away at a gen to try to fool spine chill occasionally, you will be slow as you do it. And if you try to do this with every gen, you waste a lot of time. You could easily be on the wrong side of the map. If you bring monitor and abuse and whispers to do this, it's really nice. But again, spine chill will counter it. If you have an object on your game, now you have an object that can see you from even closer, which is bad. It will be relaying information to the team. So ideally, you want to use your stealth as best as you can, get a cheeky early hit, and hope that they make some blunders and they don't play super safe, because your ambushing power is not that great. She does have some add-ons that increase the ambush potential a little bit. I think the increase is very minuscule, considering some other killers have insanely good add-ons. Most of these add-ons, oddly enough, are brown and yellow, so that's kind of sad. It's really what could make her better. But similar to Demogorgon, these add-ons are as an afterthought, and the main add-ons are focusing on her stall. Her stall has the potential, as I said, to keep survivors busy for 30 seconds, which would be nothing, or to keep them busy for 2.5 minutes and even kill them. Here's the problem. The reason why people die to the pig is because they're either stupid and they just rush gens mindlessly, or because the pig runs really good add-ons and they kind of fall for the trick. I'm telling you, if the pig was a very popular killer and survivors actually had to learn how to play against better and better pigs, they would figure out that maybe 99ing gens for a little bit is acceptable, and that maybe you should let the survivor heal up or do one search and and then pop a gen if possible. And really good survivors, trust me, they can hold the gens for a little bit. Yeah, sure, you can have Pop Goes the Weasel, you can make it harder, but really good survivors against a killer that is not as threatening as some of the higher tier killers in this list. They have the ability to do gens across the map, split the pressure, and pop gens on a more careful basis. Also, if your chase potential is not high, and I don't think the pix is particularly high, there's also the threat that they might just finish a generator or two by the time you get your first down, which is super crushing and will happen to you more often than the pig than with other killers, where your first down takes a little while. That being said, she does take, even with the good stalling add-ons, if survivors play smart, I don't think her add-ons are that crazy. Even if you have the add-on Tamper Timer or the jig or the crates or the annotated plans and so on, even if you have these add-ons which can sometimes be scary, if survivors play smart, and I'm assuming that survivors play smart against every killer, they're not that threatening and they're RNG based. You will have games where your power does absolutely nothing, which is a little bit sad. On average, however, which is what we're judging, it's okay. The best a pig can do, in my opinion, is to have the odd chasing perk here and there, some game stall and some info, and stack the game stall really, really big time. Make it so that the survivors constantly are in a 3v1 because one of them is constantly trying to get the reverse bear trap off. That's pig at her best, and she's decent. She's not a bad killer at all. The learning curve to her, to using her dash in ambush and using it creatively around structures to, like, you know, bounce off objects and hit people around corners. All of those things are amazing. Unfortunately, you know, good survivors will make it much harder. But she's an alright killer. Her add-ons just don't add that much, in my opinion, and that's why she's one of the lower rated killers. That being said, Wraith. Wraith is another killer that depends on add-ons, much like Trapper or Ghostface. His add-ons are amazing. Even brown to pink, they're all good, or at least all of them have something to offer. Brown one, you have the ability to be stealthy when you come out. Yellow, you've got the Bone Clapper, which is one of the best add-ons. Allows you to muffle your sounds and mess with survivors, solo or survivor friends alike. From yellow to green and purple, you have Windstorm add-ons, which make you move faster, and they're very, very nice on him. They actually give him a nice mobility that I wish was base. He's got Mangled in form of an add-on. His ultra rares are pretty nice. They give him info, or Silent Bell, which is also really powerful. Some maps are really good for him, some of them not so much. I used to think that this killer was relatively simple, and that's until I met someone who instructed me a little bit in the ways of playing Wraith, and who I learned from. Wraith is a crazy, crazy complex killer. His ability to chase people in 1v1 is garbage, worse than the pig. If you chase a survivor normally, your power literally does nothing for you in a chase, other than some extremely rare chances where you can cloak and use the distance. They're 1 in a million. Basically has no power in chase. His power resides in the ability to traverse the map quickly, to creep up to survivors from very, very close before they know you're there, and to use that speed and that surreptitiousness to catch survivors off guard, to approach from angles they wouldn't dream of, and to sneak in for that first hit. Here's the thing. That's the first hit. What happens to the second hit? Assuming that you don't have perks to insta-down, which are all hard to use and all inconsistent, you will need to hit survivors multiple times. And what you need to do to achieve this is not to hit them once and then chase them normally, for the most part, is you will not be able to do this. They will run, they will find safety and just loop you normally. What you need to do is juggle with them. You need to hit a survivor, have anti-healing perks, anti-healing add-ons, etc. Switch to another survivor, get a quick hit on them, maybe interrupt another survivor, he drops a pallet, okay, I'm up to the first one, he's almost healed, hey, I'm here, bam. And you need to use all kinds of tricks to achieve this. Tricks could be survivors in the open. Well, I'm going to take 10 seconds longer going around the edge of the map, and I'm going to approach from behind. I will fool his pine shield, and I will take 10 seconds longer, but that will save me 30 seconds in chase. And he will not see this coming. You can do these kinds of plays, and it's extremely satisfying. It requires a lot of skill and experience. And even good survivors can be fooled by this, because they usually don't expect Wraiths to play on that level. But what's the problem? For every add-on and perk that you can bring to slow down healing, and to keep everybody injured, and to force survivors into the vulnerable state that you want them to be, Survivors have also perks and add-ons of their own. They can have really good medkits. They can have perks to stay injured and do and be fine. Iron Will, Dead Heart, Resilience, Spine Chill, blah blah. They can have perks to either get them out of the injured state quickly or keep them into the injured state and get some benefit out of it. So for some for that reason, you will encounter the odd teams that once you hit a dent on them, they don't budge. They don't immediately collapse. They actually make you work really hard. They call out your position really well. It's really hard to catch them off guard. They know it's a race, so they don't place themselves in positions where you can easily trap them. They take advantage of the fact that if they play careful, you don't really get that many sneak hits in, and they can slowly but surely do gens across the board. And there are maps where you can legit play nearly flawlessly and just not win. Just because, you know, okay, you get the hit, now they're on guard, they reach a pallet, and you know that you just cannot chase. You know, okay, that you break the pallet, now they're onto the next one. Now you break away, find a survivor, get a hit, same thing. These really difficult maps, the maps like Cowshed, maps with pallets that are spread out, maps where you kind of really hide yourself in, make it really hard. That being said, the add-ons are very serviceable. They're super good. They help you sneak and keep survivors guessing. Some maps for him are really good as well. You should have no problem doing alright on average with Wraith, but you will have some rough games every now and then. Just based on the fact that no matter how good of a Wraith you are, for the most part, you cannot insta-down survivors. You cannot grab them out of luck, out of gens. Again, for the most part. And it really, like, for you to play Wraith efficiently, you need to use a big chunk of your brain. More so than with almost any other killer. And that is really rough, considering that survivors only need to do some very basic looping to counterplay that. He is a perk dependent and add-on dependent killer. We are allowing perks and add-ons, so he keeps up a little bit, but he doesn't have an edge over the rest of killers, in my opinion. That's why he's a bit lower than the rest. You can still play him to great effect, however, so don't be discouraged. My candidate for the worst killer in the game still, although maybe with a recent buff he could be up a notch or two, is the Clown. The Clown is an unfortunate killer. He recently received a buff that I think should have come a long time ago. This buff works in the following way. When the Clown releases his bottle, not when he holds it, but when he releases it, he used to be slowed down a fair amount. And what this meant is that if you were chasing a survivor in a straight line, the movement that you robbed them by slowing them down with your bottle was really not that different from the movement that you robbed yourself from releasing the bottle. So that meant that the Clown, to catch up to a survivor, was actually quite bad. You had to use add-ons to mitigate this. If you watch the add-on guide, I still have the outdated information, so you'll know how he worked then. But now Clown is a little bit better. When he releases the bottle, he's not slowed down at all. Just like Freddy, he can slow down survivors without slowing himself down in the slightest. That's great. That makes Clown better at catching up with survivors who just hold forward, and still gives him the full benefit at loops. So what Clown can do, basically, is slow down survivors to catch up to them quicker. And once you're in a loop, he can make it so that it's really hard to get away from him, unless you use pallets and drop them early. Similar to Pick, he suffers from survivors dropping pallets immediately. If a survivor drops a pallet, he can vault it. Even if he's under the effect of the gas, the vaulting of the pallet is immediate. So Clowns pick up on this fact, and for the most part, you'll see them run Brutal Strength, Enduring Spirit Fury, or just break the pallet immediately because they know they kind of play around it. So pre-dropping pallets hurts the Clown a little bit, but not every pallet is safe, and sometimes with these perks you can break a pallet and still not make a lot of distance to the next one. He is a map-dependent killer. Maps with tons of interlocked pallets, like say Orman, will hurt him. And the problem with Clown is twofold. Number one, by using his ability, he slows himself down. Not only does he have the average movement speed killer movement, he is actually slower than that because he has to reload. Every 4 bottles, by default, more with add-ons or quicker reload with add-ons, he has to reload for 5 seconds, at which point he moves at like 40% movement speed. He moves extremely slow. So his mobility overall is slow. If you need to reload during a chase, you usually waste 5 seconds with the survivors, trapped somewhere. If you reload while they're not trapped, they'll just make distance. If you reload after a hook, you will be slowed down and you won't be able to immediately go for another gen. So his mobility over the map is painful. And that on top of the fact that he has no added lethality kind of sucks. He does have a really strong add-on, the Pinky Finger, that allows him to insta-down survivors. That is really powerful. Completely changes him. I wouldn't consider it in this tier list. Assuming that he's using everything else that he's got. The best thing he can do is hit a survivor and then use a bunch of bottles to hit him out again as quickly as possible, praying that he doesn't use the speed boost to go to safety. The fact that he has to hit survivors twice and that he relies on lethality perks that are all somewhat unreliable to get the downs quicker is what hurts him. Because if you take a long time to down a survivor and you're slow to navigate around the map, gens will be done across the map at a pace where you cannot keep up with. That's the main problem with the clown. There are many perks that also hurt him. You can do a really good bottle, and if someone can use that heart and still make it to the pallet. You can use a really good bottle, and survivors can still, you know, stay injured and use the as unbreakable on you. You know, he's one of those killers that even though he has a really high skill ceiling, because using his bottles effectively, in my opinion, is hard and definitely complex. Even though he has a very high skill ceiling, he doesn't really get rewarded. If you hit all of your hatchets as a Huntress, you're on a roll. You're gonna do so well. If you hit all of your bottles as a clown, you don't necessarily get rewarded too much. It just means that, okay, you just get an M1 a little bit quicker than you would have otherwise. So for that reason, he struggles a little bit in chase. The bad maps for killers are bad maps for him. He doesn't have any anti-stealth for the most part. He doesn't have any built-in stall. In fact, he kind of slows himself down, as we've explained. So he's entirely reliant on his add-ons and his perks. That being said, now that he's buff, his add-ons do a little bit more. You've got exhaustion add-ons, which can deny people of Dead Heart. You use a bottle throughout the chase, and that guy is exhausted for 30 seconds, which he will not recover in chase. So Dead Heart is out of the way. Balanced landing, life out of the way. Problem? Most of the good survivors choose between Dead Heart and Sprint Burst. And if you have a team full of Sprint Bursts, that exhaustion is wasted. And if you have survivors who have good perks but no exhaustion perks, obviously that exhaustion add-on is also wasted. Survivors who are out of a hook are always not exhausted. Yeah, these add-ons are a bit of a hit or miss. He's got some other add-ons that are decent. You can spam bottles with the Chip Gin bottle. Because you have extras and you don't slow yourself down now, so it's more worth it. You can see their autos with the other ultra rare. You can slow them down further with the flask of bleach. These are all decent, but they're not entirely game changing, and they don't really help his chase potential a whole lot, in my very personal opinion. I'm gonna have to wrap it up because in 4 minutes my stream is starting. Things that the clown has going for him. He can do some cute mind games. He can, you know, blur vision and do things that, you know, and fool survivors in ways that other killers cannot. I can see how maybe someone who is extremely good at playing clown could make him look good and maybe even elevate him a few spots in the tier list. But anything a clown can do, other killers for the most part can do better, and that's my perception of him. That was my explanation for every single killer. Well, that was a mouthful. We've been only going for 2 hours. Yeah, that's more or less what I expected. I'm gonna take a little break, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. And if you are one of those wonderful people that waits at 7 p.m. my time before the stream starts and is already waiting there, I'll be seeing you soon then. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this informative. Now that I think about it thoroughly, I realize there's many things I haven't said. Like, for example, Freddy having a weaker endgame. There's many things I've probably missed, but that I do take into account, trust me. That being said, there might be something I've missed. Maybe a combination of add-ons or something I haven't really considered. That could shake up this tier list. It's one I put together relatively quickly without tons of super in-depth testing or, you know, lots of data, even though I've been playing them a lot and play with every killer and tried to consider as many things as possible. So if I did miss something and you feel like one of these killers is, you know, should be comfortably placed a few places higher or lower, why don't you write down a comment and let me know. Just kidding. You've already written down a really angry comment. I'm gonna go read it now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.